Okay, I think we can get started soon. I see some attendees rolling in here. I think we'll start it off. We have a lot of information to cover. So thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Keeping Your Workers Safe with Disinfecting Robots. My name is Amel Ali and I will be your moderator. Today's webinar is being presented by Fetch Robotics with speakers from Build with Robots and SmartGuard-UV. Before I introduce our three speakers, I'd like to cover off a few housekeeping items. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with your colleagues and anyone else you think might be interested. Everyone will be muted, but we invite your comments and questions. Please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, just type it in there and they will be held for the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Okay, so today's presenters are CEO of Fetch Robotics, Melanie Wise, Head of Customer Engagement at Build with Robots, Kimberly Corbett, and Business Development Manager at Piedmont National's SmartGuard-UV, John David Thompson. So welcome all. And at this time, I'm going to hand the floor over to Melanie, who's going to start today's presentation. Melanie, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties trying to figure out how to unmute. But good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar. Today, I really want to dive into some high-level topics around disinfection and disinfection practices, and then hand it over to two of our partners at Fetch who have been building disinfectant products on top of our AMR solutions. And so I think one of the things is that when the pandemic hit, Fetch really looked at how we could provide support to companies who are interested in disinfection. And so when you look at it, we provide the AMR solution, and they're really acting on how do we implement and help with the CDC established guidelines for disinfection, which is clean frequently all touch surfaces, and develop and implement and maintain a disinfection plan. And I think that's one of the things that AMR solutions can help with in terms of automating your disinfection and enabling your customers to get back to work, or your own workers to get back to work in your buildings. One of the big advantages of autonomous cleaning disinfection versus manual disinfection is, it's far less labor intensive, and the effectiveness is much higher. If you look at it today, manual disinfection actually has a pretty low effectiveness rate overall, and 68% of all high touch surfaces are missed during the cleaning activity. In addition to that, the workers who are doing these activities are exposed to chemicals that put them at risk. And when you look at autonomous disinfection, they're really reducing the risk. They're working with these robots collaboratively to instruct them to go do the disinfection task. So they're still employed doing the disinfection task, but they're now doing it in a safe manner. And in addition, you're able to disinfect more frequently and carry out these disinfection tasks with a much higher effectiveness. And so if you look at the two solutions that we're going to be presenting today with our partners, Build with Robots and Piedmont National SmartGuard-UV, we're really going to be talking about two disinfection solutions. One is disinfectant ultraviolet light, and the other is disinfectant fogging. And we see these two solutions as solutions that can work together in environments to provide deep cleaning or to capture surfaces that are more porous, and to do more frequent disinfection during the daylight hours in conference rooms and other office or in manufacturing environments. And so I'm about to kick it off to our disinfection partners. I think that, you know, we're excited to be working with Build with Robots and Piedmont National on these two products, the BreezyOne and SmartGuard UV. And I hope that you are excited to learn more about disinfection.
Great. Thank you, Melanie. So we now come to the first of today's poll questions. Just going to launch that for you all. So the first question is, what is your greatest need from a disinfection solution? The answers could be needs to disinfect quickly during shift changes or breaks, no PPE for staff, expanded coverage, meaning needs to disinfect high and deep racks or shelving units, safe around electronics and delicate materials, or full disinfection of high touch areas. Now, if your need is not on here, you can also hit other. We're just going to take a few moments here, so please make your selections, and we'll share the results once we have about 50% of our attendees responded. Okay, lots of answers coming in here. Just give you guys a few more moments. All right. Oh, we still have some rolling in here. Okay. I'm gonna end the poll here. I think we've got quite a bit of people responded. So the top 3 responses were number 1 being full disinfection of high touch areas. Number 2 being needs to disinfect quickly during shift changes, as an example. And then our third most popular is safe around electronics and delicate materials. So thank you all for that. And I kick it off next to Kimberly from Build with Robots to talk about our first disinfection solution. Kimberly, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie, for letting us be here today, and Amel for setting this up. So Build with Robots has been really focused on large facility disinfecting, and recently several of our customers have been talking with us at great length about CDC requirements or CDC recommendations and what they can do to be in compliance with those. So I included some of that information here today. So one thing that we found, especially in spaces like schools, is that there needs to be a distinction between cleaning and disinfecting. And as facilities are making their plans, it works well to carry on cleaning as they always have, and then add a disinfecting solution on top of that. What the CDC says is that after your regular cleaning, disinfecting kills or inactivates germs on surfaces and objects. Disinfecting works best by using chemicals as directed on surfaces after they've been properly cleaned. So developing a plan is really straightforward when you're using an autonomous solution, because with Build with Robots, we come in and make the map for you using the fetch base. And then you know after your staff cleans that BreezyOne goes through and disinfects everything completely every night. And you have a report so that you know between shifts every night, in the morning before a shift starts, everything's been disinfected and is safe for your staff. So it goes back to what Melanie was mentioning, to develop your plan, implement your plan, and then maintain and revise it. So BreezyOne is using chemicals that are on the EPA list N, so that 99.999% of pathogens are eradicated in your space every time you use BreezyOne. That means that if there are 1 million microbes in a square inch, after Breezy disinfects your space, there's one or fewer microbe left in that space. So it really eradicates all pathogens. The chemical mist or fog that goes into the air, and it really is a fog, is safe to be around after 20 or 30 minutes. In really big spaces, you need about 20 minutes for the fog to settle. In smaller spaces, like in a bathroom, it's a little bit longer. One BreezyOne unit can disinfect over 100,000 square feet in about an hour and a half on the long end. In a very open space, like an airport, it's shorter than that. It's a little under an hour to do 100,000 square feet. In a more fragmented space, like a school, where Breezy's going into classrooms and then navigating to the next classroom, it takes probably a full hour and a half to do that much square footage. The other advantage of using a chemical disinfectant is that if you have porous surfaces, that chemical fog is able to disinfect those surfaces and get around sort of the back of fixtures and coat everything with the disinfectant. The disinfectant that we're using right now dries to a really undetectable fine powder. You can see it after about 6 weeks of continuous use. If a surface isn't cleaned, you can start to see a little bit of like dust, but generally it's totally undetectable and very safe to be around.
The first thing we do at a new facility is interview the staff to understand their cleaning and disinfecting workflow. One thing we figured out early on is that the system absolutely has to integrate with current operations. Our intent is for the robots to operate in parallel with these existing workflows for seamless integration. Once we determine the best sequence for fogging, we use a BreezyOne unit to map and survey the space. The floor plan you see on the screen was actually developed by the robot's onboard sensors. Once we have the spaces fully mapped, our application engineers can program fogging zones and fogging paths and load them into the robot. Once they are loaded and tested, we're ready to go. Based on how we break up the workflow, we define fogging zones and program them into the interface. When ready, the user can fog just an individual zone or tell the robot to fog the entire sequence. Once we've decided what we need to fog, the operator will prep Breezy, verify the space to be fogged is clear, then activate the fogging unit and send Breezy along its merry way. Breezy will navigate to its first starting point, then start its fogging pattern. One of the most important things we do when we're designing your fogging path is swab for total bacterial load in high traffic and high touch areas. We use bacteria as a proxy for viral load because it's easier to detect and they generally occur in the same space. After fogging, we go through and swab again to make sure that we're fogging effectively to disinfect your space and to refine our fogging path.
So one of the things we didn't show in that video is that the janitorial staff, Breezy is a janitor-assisted tool. The janitorial staff pushes the button on the user interface and they go and do another part of their work. So while Breezy is disinfecting whatever section they send it to disinfect, they are pulling trash in another area or sweeping another area, and then Breezy returns to the start point and waits for them, and they come and tell Breezy where to go and disinfect next. So Breezy really fits into their workflow and does what they tell it to do, and it's a really great partner for them. So I'm going to pause this video. What this video is showing, this is an office space at a large data center. And what The numbers in red are showing is total viable count of pathogens before fogging and total viable count after fogging and the percent kill of pathogens in that facility. You can see in the center that there's one space where we didn't have a very good kill. So our application engineers adjusted the path. And this happened when we were setting the fogging route, and we found an area through our microbial testing where we weren't doing a good job. So what you'll see in the video is that the application engineers programmed Breezy, and they have just one fogger on because they're fogging into a really small space. So they switched it so there's just one fogger on. Breezy goes in front of that small breakout room, rotates, and kind of puffs into the room. And that totally fixed the problem of there not being adequate microbial kill in that space. And then what that customer knows is that their entire space, every time they run Breezy, is being completely disinfected because we tested it ahead of time for them. So this is the tiny room that we were just missing. It was getting a little bit of fog, but not very much. And this is how we fixed it. So you can see just one fogger's on, and it just turns and puffs into the room. This is another way that we test to make sure things are in there, or that there's enough chemical in the space. Amel, did I mess it up?
No, I think you just went just a touch too far. Here you go.
Okay. So with Breezy, you're 1 to 2 weeks away from being compliant with CDC recommendations and to having your employees and customers feel really good about coming to work and being in their space.
I think you can.
Amel, I'm failing.
No worries.
Can you play the video for me?
Sure thing.
Okay.
Knowing that BreezyOne is sanitizing everything before I come to work gives me peace of mind. When this all started, you know, especially everybody's so worried about going to work, and we never stopped going to work. We had to come here every night. So coming in knowing now that BreezyOne went through and sanitized everything, that we have kind of peace of mind that it's making me safe and my job safe.
Oh, it's going to be nice because it's going to spray the chairs down, the floors, the handles, just it's going to be in the air. You know what I mean? It's going to be nice. It's going to help so much.
People think of us like it's just janitors. It's good to like have someone care about like our safety. It means something. It means a great deal to me.
It's going to give people peace of mind throughout the whole city, the whole country, to just come to any facility and feel safe, feel that the airport is, or any facility is sanitized. So we feel you have peace of mind, you feel safe, and you have nothing to worry about.
Great.
Okay, that's it for me.
Thank you, Kimberly. So this brings us to our final poll question. Get that launched here for you all. Okay, so our final poll question. What kind of areas do you need to disinfect? Warehouse, manufacturing facilities, large indoor spaces. Examples are cafeterias, lounges, library, open plan desks, airports, and then small indoor spaces. Some examples of those are personal office, meeting rooms, cubicles, etc. And again, if you don't see your area on here, just feel free to hit other. We're gonna wait here as the polls are coming in. I'll give you all a few moments and then I can let you know what our top 3 are. All right, we have a lot of answers coming in here, so I'll give you all a few more moments. Okay. I think we've reached the majority. Oh, we still have a few popping in. Okay, so it looks like our number one area that needs the most disinfectant with our attendees are large indoor spaces like cafeterias, lounges, libraries, open plan desks, airports, etc. Our second most popular is small indoor spaces. And then, oh, we still have a bunch rolling in here. And then our third most popular is manufacturing facilities. So thank you all for that. I will now hand it off to our third speaker, John David Thompson. John David, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Amel and Melanie. Thank you all for putting this together and the opportunity to talk about disinfection in the workplace. It's obviously something a lot of us have been spending a lot of time engaging in over the past many months. So we, again, appreciate you setting this up so we can look at this together. Mel, I'm not showing control of the mouse.
It says it's waiting. Let me try this again.
Alrighty. Alrighty, there we go. I believe it's gonna do that now.
There you are.
All right. Well, going to, there we are. So, you know, as we're talking about and focusing on keeping employees safe through autonomous UV disinfection, where obviously the primary focus this morning or afternoon, again, depending where you are, is looking at the workplace. But we all know it's more than just the workplace, whether it's schools, whether it is Kimberly's identified as it's looking at senior living facilities, getting people back out. We just had the WHO in the past 24, 48 hours has come out identifying some of those unintended side effects and consequences we've had from these lockdowns. So the question really becomes is, how do we end this? How do we get employees back into the workplace? How do we get children back into the schools? And how do we return to maybe a little bit of a new normal, but return to more of a normal day-to-day living in a way that feels a lot safer, and not just feels safer, but actually is safer. And that's where these type of applications begin to come into play. And the short answer is, in answering how do we do this, is that we need new solutions. Over the past 6 to 9 months, we've done all of the older disinfection methods, and we're still struggling in some ways. We're seeing increases again in COVID-19 cases. And so it's, what are these new solutions? What can they look like? And that's what I know we're all excited to be able to talk about today. Are some of these leaps forward, not just incremental steps, but leaps forward in disinfection practices. And so as we talk about neutralizing the spread of pathogens in the workplace, I want to briefly review existing measures that are in place that I really label as more of defensive measures, and then kind of transition from that into more of the offensive measures, some of what we've already talked about, and then spend a few minutes talking about autonomous UV disinfection, which is obviously where I live in the SmartGuard UV world. You know, if you were to ask the average person in the street back in January what PPE was, what rapid testing was, contact tracing, quarantining, I'm going to ask them where they bought their mask. You probably get a funny look. We have just adapted, and the world has changed in the past 9 months as we've seen this increase of COVID here. Our culture has rapidly evolved over these past 9 months to a year to deal with this impact from COVID-19. And that's become the catalyst for us talking about all these disinfection methods and these strategies. But one thing I want us to keep in mind as we're talking about this, as we're thinking about disinfection, whether it be in the workplace, in schools, or in any environment, is that while COVID is the catalyst for us having this conversation, it's much bigger. We've accepted as normal flu season, or a certain level of the flu season, of the seasonal cold and everything else. And while none of us believe that we're going to be able to completely eradicate it entirely, all of these new methods are going to help us redefine what normal is. We're going to be able to not just deal with COVID, but deal with all of these other viruses and pathogens that have been out there. The flu alone, it was estimated in 2018 had a $16.8 billion impact to the US economy from lost worker productivity, sick time, and everything else. And so every dent we can make into that not only helps get people back into the workplace, but also helps the economy in recovery. These measures you got listed here, the social distancing, the frequent hand washing, the rapid testing, the quarantining, contact tracing, masks, PPE, they're good and necessary, but they are defensive measures against these pathogens. And so what I want us to talk about, and really what the focus of our discussion is as we move into the autonomous disinfection, is looking more at offensive measures. And there's really two areas we focus in offensive measures. And you've heard this if you've paid attention, and I know many, if not most of you have, to what the CDC and others are coming out and saying. You've got the offensive measures of looking at the air disinfection and its transmission through the air. Things like UV disinfection of HVAC coils, HEPA air filtration, upper air UV, UV disinfection within HVAC ductwork. But even once you do that air disinfection, it still leaves us susceptible. And while these are important components to disinfection, but those air systems still leave us vulnerable to the high touch, high contact areas where we're going to transfer these pathogens from tables to counters to handrails to door handles, elevator buttons, desks, seats, you name it, the list goes on, copy machines and those break areas. And so then you move into the offensive measures about what are we doing to actively disinfect those high touch areas. And we've talked a little bit about the manual cleaning and the manual, and even some of the beyond the manual cleaning, the actual disinfection that takes place on top of that, but still done manually. You've probably seen folks walking around with those backpack sprayers, whether conventional sprayers or electrostatic sprayers. You see ceiling UV installations that are mounted over hard surfaces to disinfect areas. And then we've seen, and as Kimberly already highlighted, we're beginning to see the robotic sprayer, the excellent solution that BreezyOne has put together in helping to disinfect these spaces. And then what I'm going to be spending a good chunk of time talking about, which is autonomous robotic UV disinfection, which helps to become just a complementary resource for that ongoing proactive disinfection process in the workplace. With regard to the UV disinfection and really looking a little bit at some of the specifics of the SmartGuard UV, one of the things that we want to overcome, and one of the reasons we're talking about autonomous disinfection as a whole, before I even get into the details of the SmartGuard UV in specifics, is that manual disinfection, as Melanie started to highlight, it's not that it's ineffective, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it, period, but there are a number of downsides, or at least things that if we could, we would want to overcome. It's things that I believe we overcome with autonomous solutions like the BreezyOne and the SmartGuard UV. One of the things that's already highlighted is we're exposing employees and even cleaning crews to chemicals as well as the viruses. Viruses on the front end, chemicals on the back end. So we want to mitigate against this as much as we can. There's a high cost associated with employee training on disinfection and cleaning. Then there's overtime, there's sick time. There's the employee turnover that goes on. There's increased liability. If a person slips, they fall, they get sick on the job. We talk about the lack of consistency. Even the best intentioned, well-meaning, well-trained person, there's only a certain level of consistency we as humans can have in that disinfection process. I don't know how many of us have used Lysol or a similar spray. We spray it on the counter and then we wipe it off. We've actually negated the whole disinfection process. You're supposed to let that chemical sit. And yet in our minds, we think if we wipe it, we're doing a better job. And that's just not the case. And so we're not even following the standard practices for the chemicals and the different disinfection processes that we have. And then there's a limited measurement and verification that's going to happen from the average cleaning disinfecting crew. And so these are all things that we want to, if possible, overcome. And that's where these autonomous disinfection solutions make these really giant leaps forward in this disinfection process. And so it's these limitations to manual disinfection, again, are just going to be a few of the ways that things like BreezyOne and then what I'll talk about here with the SmartGuard UV begins to help us in disinfecting the workplace, the schools, and elsewhere. So the SmartGuard UV it's an autonomous mobile robot that disinfects high-touch, high-contact areas in as little as a few seconds, up to a couple of minutes, depending upon the size of the area you're attempting to disinfect, whether it be door handles, elevator buttons, desks, chairs, countertops, etc. The SmartGuard UV and UV in general is effective against not only COVID-19, but a wide range of viruses and bacteria from norovirus to influenza to MRSA to C. diff, E. coli, many, many more. And this gets to that point that this is not just a COVID solution. This is not just a temporary solution. This is something that has far-reaching implications in a very positive way as we look at making holistic changes to workplace and businesses, schools, and elsewhere. Our autonomous UV solution, it's designed to operate and work around persons. Obviously, we can't shine UV light directly onto a person, but we've got integrated safety measures to be able to go on an ongoing basis to interact and go around persons. And a lot of it has to do with the way we've designed our SmartGuard UV and the type of technology we use for the UV disinfection. We have customers who will run disinfection routes on an hour at the top of every hour, hitting all the really common areas, your door handles, your elevator buttons, etc., where those viral loads have the greatest chance of building up, so that you're doing ongoing disinfection in those areas. The other benefit that comes, and we already see this a little bit from what we've seen from the BreezyOne, but is this consumer confidence that we build. We've integrated audio enunciators into our units as they're rolling around hotels. They're playing messages saying, hey, we're doing our part to help disinfect this space. And it's immediately safe to return once disinfection is done. And the feedback you hear from customers, guests, and others as they go around these spaces is tremendous as they recognize the steps that are being taken to help in this disinfection process. So not only is it actually achieving disinfection and helping to make it a safer place, a safer workplace, a safer place to visit, there's also this ongoing marketing aspect and that consumer confidence, encouraging people that this is a place to return to, that it's safe to return to this place. Moving on to the next slide here, I mentioned the technology. One of the aspects of the SmartGuard UV is we use pulse Xenon. It's a little bit newer technology. UV has been around for over 100 years since we first recognized that it was effective against bacteria and viruses. But there's been other leaps forward with that technology, in this case with pulse Xenon, and trust me, I would love to geek out over it and go into a ton of detail. I won't do that to y'all today, but it provides a broad spectrum of UV A, B, and C, which every one of those nanometer spectrums has an effectiveness against viruses, bacteria, and pathogens in that inactivation and deactivation of the RNA and DNA and killing those viruses. Rather than being an always-on source, it pulses every 6 seconds. And so it may roll up and pulse 3 to 4 times, up to 10 times in an area as it's disinfecting spaces as it goes about. It's safe for use around food processing. It's environmentally friendly. And as I noted, it's safe against viruses, bacteria, mold, and fungi. It provides a rapid disinfection. And so we're excited about being able to integrate these new technologies to build upon just the complexity and the engineering that's gone into these fetch bases, to add to that some of the latest in UV technology and bring them together in a new solution that helps us to achieve in a rapid way the disinfection of everything from offices to retail to hospitality, and the list goes on. And so that's the high-level overview of the technology, of the pulse Xenon technology. And you've probably heard of other UV robots in the marketplace. They're out there. And so just some of those distinguishing features. One of the things we knew we had to do, I think there's something like 28 other autonomous UV robots that I know of in the world. And not all of those are in the US. And we knew we had to have something different. If it was going to be effective, we're going to make a change, something needs to be different. And so by being able to build with Fetch upon the Fetch base and what we've done on the UV tower, we've been able to achieve run times that are 2 to 3 times longer than anything else that's in the marketplace. We knew we needed a UV solution that can operate a full work shift. And so that's what we worked to design. We wanted to be able to use less energy in the overall process. We want to be energy conscious in that. We've been able to achieve that. Be able to be directional and targeted in the UV application, not just be a blob of UV that moves around, but be direct and targeted, focusing on all those high touch, high contact surfaces. And while standard UVC, germicidal UV is effective, it's not the most effective. In fact, it's not even most effective on the UV in the UVC range, 265 to 267 nanometers being that most effective range that we're able to operate in. The pulse Xenon doesn't have photon degradation with long-term exposure. When you're thinking about sensitive equipment and other things, there's no photon degradation with it, where we don't see that deterioration. You may have seen like a yellowing of plastic and fluorescent lenses, and that's due to the UV that's coming out of those. That doesn't happen with the pulse Xenon. It's also a consistent energy source. other UV robotic systems that are on the market, those UV lamps, just like the lights in your fixture, unless you've got an LED, the lights in your fixtures are slowly degrading over time. Same's true with UV. From the day it's turned on to the day it ends, it's having this degradation. And the result is you've got to try to compensate that and try to guesstimate the calculation that's needed for effective disinfection as it rolls around. Conversely, with pulse xenon, it's the same amount of energy pulsing from the very first pulse to the very last before those eventually have to be changed out. And so it provides that consistency is one of those big pieces when it comes to the measurement and verification, knowing how long things are taking place, knowing the same amount of time is required from day one to the the most recent disinfection process to achieve the same level of disinfection and dosage or fluency in that disinfection process. And we've talked about a little bit the importance of measurement and verification. As we go around performing these disinfection processes, we want to note when disinfection took place, the time, the date it took place, the location that was being disinfected, a photo record of the event, a photo record of a non-event. If someone or something was prohibiting us from being able to perform the UV disinfection process because we didn't want to expose anybody directly to UV and they couldn't move away, providing that type of photo record so that we know why it didn't take place. It's one thing to know it didn't happen. It's a whole nother thing to know why didn't it take place and be able to then return in its route to perform that disinfection of any missed areas. And then provide the duration of the disinfection to ensure that we're getting sufficient dosage or fluency in that disinfection process. And so all of this reporting becomes a big piece in that measurement and verification, that repeatability in the disinfection process, something that's very, very hard, if not impossible to achieve with manual disinfection processes. And really, there's more that could be said. Again, I could talk about our solution all day long. I'm sure you've got questions about UV and be happy to talk about that. But as we talk about existing disinfection measures, we know they provide some protection against pathogens. We know they do. However, as we've seen over the past year, these things are not enough. What we've been doing is not enough. We can and must do more to help protect our families, our children, employees, guests, and others. Viruses are not going away. We need a better way of getting employees back to work, getting kids back in the schools while working to keep them safe. We need a new type of safeguard. And I think these autonomous solutions are that new type of safeguard. They're going to help us to overcome many of the limitations in manual disinfection. It's going to help provide additional protection against pathogens in a way that's safer, it's quicker, it's going to be more reliable, it's more effective, and much less expensive when compared to the ongoing costs and liability of manual disinfection. And so again, we know we aren't going to eliminate every contagion or prevent persons from ever again getting sick. Trust me, if we could, we would. But we can do more than ever before to help mitigate against these. And we really want to help redefine what the new normal is and what is expected when it comes to flu season or other sick times during the year. And we want to help mitigate against all viruses, current, the ones we're battling now, as well as those that are in the future. And so I know I'm excited. I know Kimberly's excited, and we've loved the partnership with Fetch, with Melanie and all, in the development of these autonomous solutions to help provide disinfection in the workplace. So thank you all so much for your time. I know we're looking forward to answering some of your questions.
Yeah, and to kick that off, I'm going to start by answering some of the navigation questions that came in, since that's one of the parts of both of these products that are supplied by Fetch. And so both the BreezyOne and the SmartGuard UV are built on our Freight 100 platform, and that platform has autonomous navigation capabilities that work in many environments. Today, we've deployed hundreds of Fetch Freight 100 robots in 26 countries in very varying environments. So the navigation system of our robots includes a LiDAR and 2 3D cameras that help it avoid low to the ground obstacles like pallets, forklift tines, things like that. And then overhanging obstacles like things that you would encounter in manufacturing, or even something that you might encounter in everyday scenarios like a table. Typically the legs, you can see the legs, but there may be a tabletop that is kind of detached from the ground, so to say, and the robot might think it could drive under that, but we use the 3D cameras to avoid situations like that. And then all of this is connected to our Fetch Core platform, which is a cloud-based platform that provides all the APIs and capabilities for integrating with. And both Piedmont and Build with Robots have integrated with those APIs and provided application layers on top of it for doing their custom applications. And so that's kind of the high-level understanding of our navigation. If you have more questions about that, Fetch can also provide a webinar for you to view on how our navigation works and how autonomous navigation works for these types of robots. All right, Amel, would you like to kick it off by moderating the rest of the questions?
Yes, thank you. So to all of our attendees, if you have a question that you have not submitted yet, please enter it in the Q&A chat box, and we will try to get through as many as time allows. Okay. So our first one is to John David. Let's see. This comes from Tetsui. The question is, I'm very curious about how do you manage exposure to the harmful UV?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So we have integrated motion sensors in the UV. Apart from all of the safety features of the robot itself, we have integrated motion sensors that don't allow the triggering of the UV when it senses any motion within the proximity where harmful UV rays would be. Because we get right up as close as possible to the surfaces and areas we're disinfecting, we're able to do it very rapidly. UV exposure and dosage is all about time, distance, and energy. We've got a fixed energy output, and so it's time and distance, and we're doing very little time, and it's only to affect everything within that range that we're focusing on. Usually we focus about 10 feet wide, 10 feet tall, and about 5 feet deep per disinfection location, which is about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. Door handles, elevator buttons, that's obviously closer and quicker. But because the UV is only shining out of one side, we can do 360, but we most of the time only shine out of one side. We're able to focus on just the area we're disinfecting. We're not shining any UV on the back. You can walk up right behind it. And what's called and it's with light in general, but it affects UV as well, the inverse square law, where every doubling a distance, so if we're focusing on 5 feet, if someone's 10 feet away, it would take 4 times as much UV exposure to achieve that same level of dosage. And so with the motion sensor sensing anyone 15, 20 feet away, and we have redundancy in that, we work hard to make sure that there's very limited exposure to UV. And then the other natural things that come into play is your clothing, which prevents any UV from even being able to get through, the glass around it, UVC, about 99% of UVC and UV B is filtered out of glass, about 97% of UVA, and just your standard glass that anything would shine through. So even if you saw a bright flash of light, virtually no harmful UV is making it through whatsoever.
Great, thank you. We have another question that I believe all 3 of you could maybe take a turn to respond to if you'd like. What maintenance is done to the robot and how often? Guess, John David, we'll start with you since you're unmuted.
Sure, no problem. So the ongoing maintenance is really just as needed. And we work hard on the initial setup. There's that initial deployment that Melanie described, Kimberly highlighted as well, and the mapping and the setup, the identification of disinfection locations in our case, that we're focusing on. And it's set up to run fully autonomously from that point forward. We have certain notifications. We manage it remotely to see if anything's needed. But in terms of actual maintenance itself, of cleaning or changing thing out or anything like that, other than anything that may come up just in a standard robotic application, it should require virtually no maintenance until the light engines eventually need to be replaced at 2 to 3 years. Same thing with the batteries.
Great, Kimberly?
So we have, we found very minimal need for maintenance thus far. But Breezy does include a service contract, so we're there if something goes wrong or something needs to be fixed. We'll fix it for you within 24 hours. And thus far, everything's been very low maintenance and worked really, really well.
Okay, we have another question here. What are the unique advantageous features of this solution compared to other AMR-based solutions? I'll have you go first, Kimberly.
So I'm not sure if that question is asking more about us using Fetch or about our specific solutions. So Breezy, for our specific solutions, Breezy is the only chemical disinfecting robot that can do this big of a space, and it's designed specifically for really large spaces to disinfect large spaces very, very quickly. The AMR base, Melanie can definitely speak to better than I can, but I will say the navigation is exceptional. The object avoidance is amazing. When the base detects movement or a person in the area, it pauses, it goes around people. It's really, really good and very reliable. Has absolutely never hit anyone or anything, and is really great to work with. And Fetch is an exceptional company to partner with. And I would say confidently that any solution using a different AMR base is missing out.
Great, thank you. We have another question here for you, Kimberly. What type of disinfectant is used in the Breezy?
So we use, in two of the installations that we're in right now are using something called Spectra Shield, which has a really high log kill, is green certified, very environmentally friendly. We are also, Breezy is chemical agnostic. So as long as a chemical has an indication for fogging and is on the EPA list N to kill COVID-19, we're happy to use it. We definitely want to use chemicals that are very safe. We are currently testing 3 additional chemicals, one of them specifically to be used in data centers, and another for schools. But there are a few chemicals out there that can be used to fog that are on EPA list N, green, and very safe, and Breezy works well with all of them.
Great, thank you. And actually, I'm going to go back to the last question. John David, I don't think you were able to answer. Apologies. What are the unique advantageous features of the solution compared to other AMR-based solutions for the SmartGuard UV?
Sure. So one of the biggest ones is operating runtime, being able to operate 2, 3, in some cases 4 times longer than the other UV applications in the marketplace. That alone is a huge advantage. I mean, robots are not cheap. We know that. There's a great ROI, we believe, with them, but it is an expensive investment. So if you're going to invest in something, why not invest in something that's going to operate 3 times longer on a single charge? You're getting 3 times the productivity, especially with a quick charge time. And so that's one right away. The other one is the UV light source itself, utilizing pulse xenon as opposed to UV. The directionality, the ability to choose whether we do a 180 or 360 disinfection depending upon the space, that type of flexibility enables us to maximize the areas we're covering, make it as safe as possible around persons. And then there's the marketing side of it. Because we've designed it to be safe around persons, then there's the audio enunciators and the other features that help in more of a front of house type setting to be able to provide that consumer confidence in the disinfection process that's taking place.
Thank you. Our next question is for Kimberly. In an office environment with glass doors and partitions, does the sanitizing solution require removal from the glass so that it does not look like it's wet or has solutions dripping down the glass?
Yeah, so I'm laughing because we map really, really carefully so this doesn't happen. Because absolutely, if the robot rotated and sprayed directly onto glass, you would have some residue. So a lot of our initial setup and mapping, we're careful to make sure that doesn't happen because you would have to clean it. And in the little video that was in my part of the presentation, that's why when Breezy turned to fog into that small breakout room, only one fogger was on. With both foggers on at that point, one of the foggers would have sprayed on the glass next to the door. So we really meticulously map the space to make sure that we're not creating extra work for the janitorial staff. We love them and we want them to love us. And if we create a lot of extra work, they're not going to.
Great, thank you. We have another question for you, Kimberly. Is Breezy compatible with other solutions that can be used in an occupied space? If not, is there a plan to do so or reduce the time to occupancy?
Is Breezy compatible? So reducing time to occupancy would be dependent upon the chemical that's in use. The chemical that we've used most consistently thus far, you need about 20 to 30 minutes for that fog to completely settle. There are chemicals that are available which we believe would reduce that time to occupancy, but we have not tested them sufficiently to feel confident in saying that yet. But based on the makeup of the chemical, we think that that is possible. And if you email me in 7 to 10 days, I will have a definitive answer on it because we're testing them right now.
Great. John David, the next question is for you. What is the square footage of UV disinfection of the UV at a single application? Is it only for vertical surfaces?
Okay, so I'll work backwards. No, it's not just for vertical surfaces. It's certainly it's for desks and other applications. UV lights are mounted about 5 feet up. Has about a 170-degree beam angle, so it's able to get down on a lot of surfaces. It's great for desks and other things as it looks at shining down onto the surfaces. And likewise, it shines up another 5 feet. So in a lot of applications, you have floor-to-ceiling coverage. What we typically look at when we start, again, it's light, and light continues to travel. It's just the effectiveness of that UV diminishes the further out you get, unless you're going to sit there for a long period of time. That's not our goal. So what we design around typically is a 10-foot wide space that can be changed just based upon the amount of time we sit at a single location. But that's about 5 feet deep, 10 feet wide, and 10 feet tall. And that's disinfected in 90 seconds with our 2-light engine model.
Great, thank you. We have Kimberly, one more here for you. Let's see. Do you have any installations of BreezyOne in food or grocery warehouses?
We don't right now. That's not something that we've done. We have discussed it at great length, and we have the 2-tank model of BreezyOne will be out in a couple of weeks. And in a grocery model, I think we would want to switch the disinfectant that's used in the produce area and then change to another disinfectant that maybe has a higher log kill or greater efficacy in areas where there are not fresh food. So there is a lot of potential to that, and the ability for Breezy to be responsive based on the parts of a grocery store that it's in. I think about this all the time when I go to the grocery. So yes, it's something we're thinking about, but not that we've done yet.
Great, thank you. Next question is for John David. Does the UV exposure have a negative impact on the workers?
I want to be careful how I answer this, but UV exposure, yes, it can have a negative impact on workers. However, the way we've designed it is to avoid all of those negative aspects of UV exposure. Just as with anything else, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. And so we've worked to make sure that we've mitigated against the levels of exposure that would be adverse in the workplace. That's everything from the motion sensors to the design that I described about being able to be focused on just the 180 as opposed to 360 wherever necessary. So those features have been designed to avoid that unnecessary UV exposure in the workplace.
Great, thank you. Our next question is for both of you. Oops, coming in quick here. How much time does an installation of these solutions take? And additionally, we have another question that's similar. How long does it take from the time you place an order to get it set up and running in your facility? John David, we'll start with you.
All right, so the actual deployment from the time the robot's at your dock is about 1.5 to 2 days. That's on average per robot. If it was a large facility, we're deploying 4 or 5 robots, it wouldn't be proportional to that. It'd probably be around 4 to 5 days for a whole bunch of robots. But it's not very long. It's the length of time it takes to do the initial mapping, which is usually not more than a full day, and then begin setting up the disinfection set points. We like to do it on site, but it can also be done remotely. And so that's it's 1 to 2 days in that regard. In terms of how quickly can you have one, it depends. We got varying stocking levels. If you have a single order right now, 2 to 3 weeks. If you wanted 100 of them, I'd love to sell them to you. It's going to be about a 6 to 8 week lead time.
Great, thank you. Kimberly?
So we do a bunch of microbial testing, so it takes us a little bit longer. We're about a week to be up and running and fully disinfecting your space. Longer if we're talking about a warehouse mezzanine that doesn't have walls. Those take a little longer to map, so that would take a little bit longer for us to install. Maybe a full week for that.
Great, thank you. I think we're coming, let's see, if anyone else wants to ask a question. Let's see. I think we have about 3 more. There's a lot of you on here. Sorry, give me 1 second. Oops. Okay, sorry, 1 second. So next question, sorry about that. Do we sign contracts with Fetch or with John David or Kimberly's company?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the same answer, Kimberly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it'll be direct with us. And so we've partnered with Fetch, but on the deployment of these units, it'll be either Kimberly or SmartGuard, Build with Robots or SmartGuard UV.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Okay, this question is for both of you. We can start with you, Kimberly. Do you run demos at facilities?
We have, yes, we can demo for you in Albuquerque or Houston at facilities where Breezy is operational. It's logistically a little bit difficult for us to do a demo at potential customers' facilities, but we can discuss it.
Great, thank you. John David?
I'll echo what Kimberly said. We would love to do a demo in every facility, but there's an expensive investment in shipping and manpower and everything else that goes into mapping these and all. So while we are able to do demos on a case-by-case basis, we're happy to bring persons in to our equipment center, and where we've got them deployed, we can set up demos. We've got partners in different areas of the country where we can set up a demo, try to find one local to you. But it's case by case on whether we can do a demo at the facility level.
Great, thank you. And then I think we're going to have our last question here. It is, how do you do the microbacterial verification? Kimberly, I believe that's for you.
Yep, it is. So we use, it's Hygiena testing kits, and it tests for total viable count of bacteria. And we do both a preliminary count before we start fogging. After we've started fogging, we use bacterial control plates to test efficacy, and we do that multiple times. And it's really fun, and I can definitely help your teenager win their science fair.
All right, thank you. So if we have any other questions on here, we will make sure to send you an email to address the rest that we may not have come to. I think that is all the time that we have today. Thank you to everyone who joined us for today's webinar. Melanie, Kimberly, John David, thank you for sharing your insights and your experiences. And to all of our attendees, if you have any additional questions again, or would like to contact directly, we'll be sending out contact information along with a recording of today's webinar shortly. Thank you all for attending. I hope you have a great rest of your day and the rest of your week.
Thank you, Amel. You were great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Take care.